Raider Nation, what's up? If you're looking for an up-to-date tracker of the Las Vegas Raiders' top 30 draft visits, you've come to the right place. While we don't have all of the top 30 visits just yet, this is an overview of what's been confirmed so far. I'm going to break down the players the Raiders are meeting with and share my thoughts on why these players could be on their radar. I've organized this tracker by position since, at the moment, the Raiders have scheduled visits for 5 positions. It's also important to note that players from the Las Vegas area, like those from UNLV, don't count against the top 30 visit limit. These are considered local visits, so expect multiple players from this region to meet with the Raiders. If you bleed silver and black and are looking for comprehensive draft coverage, let's dive into the quarterback position first. Quarterback visits. The Raiders have 3 quarterbacks lined up for top 30 visits so far. The first name on the list is Cam Ward, and I'm personally excited about the idea of the Raiders finding a way to draft him. Now, I know it's a long shot, and they'd probably have to trade up to the number 1 spot, but if I were in their shoes, I'd be sitting down with him. Ward is a potential number 1 pick in this draft class, and I think he'd be a great fit in the NFL, especially in a system like Chip Kelly's. The only issue is, he probably won't end up in Las Vegas, but it's definitely a name to keep an eye on. Another quarterback on the Raiders' radar is Will Howard, who just won a national championship with Kansas State. What I love about Howard is his ability to make plays both inside and outside the pocket. If you watched his final 4 games for Ohio State last season, you saw some of the best quarterback tape out there. Of course, Howard had incredible talent around him, from the running backs to the offensive line and wide receivers. I think Ohio State could have been even better if their quarterback play had been stronger, but Howard is a solid target for day 3 of the draft and has a connection to Chip Kelly. Next up is Quinn Ewers, the quarterback from Texas. Ewers has tons of arm talent, and his upside is undeniable. He's battled through injuries but has shown great leadership, something that's been highlighted by his coaches. If you remember, Ewers was originally committed to Ohio State, and while his ties to Chip Kelly aren't as strong, it's still interesting to note. Ewers is a project player, and I think he'll need at least 2 years to develop before he's ready to start in the NFL. If the Raiders bring in a quarterback like Geno Smith, they could afford to let Ewers sit and develop for a couple of seasons. Question for you. Here's a question for the comments section. When do you think the Raiders will draft a quarterback? Do you think it'll be in round 1, day 1, day 2, rounds 2 to 3, or day 3, rounds 4 to 7? Or do you think they won't draft a quarterback at all this year? Let me know your thoughts down below. My prediction, I believe the Raiders will draft a quarterback on day 3. I've been saying this for a while. I don't think they'll go for Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart. I see them targeting quarterbacks like Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, or Kyle McCord. But taking any of these players earlier than day 3 would be a surprise to me, given the depth of talent available at other positions. There are also some strong quarterbacks coming out next year, which is another reason I think day 3 is the sweet spot for this year's QB picks. Running back position. Now let's talk about the running back position. This has been a major focus for the Raiders, especially after the struggles they had last season. The team averaged just 3.6 yards per carry and ranked at the bottom in rushing yards per game. Plus, there were 10 fumbles last season, definitely an area they need to improve on. Running back position. Watching the Raiders' rushing attack last season was frustrating, to say the least. It was clear that the team needed an upgrade in this area. Let's take a look at one of the running backs the Raiders are meeting with, Ashton Jeanty. The Raiders also met with Jeanty at the NFL Combine, and if they plan on drafting him, it'll likely be at pick number 6 overall. Jeanty is a special talent with a unique skill set, but there's one major question that needs to be answered. Can he handle pass protection? If Jeanty can't improve in that area, then I'm not sure he's worth the 6th overall pick. But if you believe he can develop in pass protection, then he could be a great addition to the Raiders' backfield. When you watch his tape, you see a player with balance, patience, and explosive burst. If the Raiders do decide to go this route, though, they'll also need to focus on building up their offensive line. You can't expect to run the ball effectively without solid protection up front. Another running back the Raiders are visiting is Caleb Johnson from Iowa. What stands out about Johnson is his patience and ability to bounce the ball to the outside, making him a solid fit for Chip Kelly's system, where outside zone running is crucial. He's got good vision and waits for the right moment to hit the hole, which is something the Raiders will value. The downside is that his lateral agility is a bit of a concern. He wasn't a standout at the NFL Combine, but I don't think that's going to turn off a coach like Pete Carroll. If you're looking for a back who can grind out 4 to 5 yards per carry and keep moving forward, Johnson is an intriguing option. When you look at the Raiders' current running back room, an upgrade is definitely needed. Gentry could pair well with Raheem Mostert, and if the Raiders want to take a running back in rounds 2 or 3, Johnson could be a great fit alongside Mostert. The Raiders could go for Gentry in the first round, but Johnson will likely be a round 2 pick, and there's no way he'll be available at pick number 68 for the Raiders. If they want to get him, they'll need to think about trading back to secure him. Cornerback position. Shifting gears to the cornerback position, the Raiders have a top 30 visit scheduled with Will Johnson, and this is a name that should be on every Raiders fan's radar. Johnson is big, long, and athletic, traits that fit well into what the Raiders' defense needs. His biggest weakness, though, is his recovery speed. At times, he can be caught off guard on double moves, which is a concern, but overall, he's a playmaker. What makes Johnson even more appealing is his connection to Michigan and the potential chemistry with the Raiders' defensive line. If the Raiders were to trade back, a selection in the 9 to 12 range could put them in position to land him. While I wouldn't take Johnson at pick number 6, he could be a great target if the Raiders find themselves in that range. Now, I know a lot of people are going to compare every cornerback to Richard Sherman, just because of how successful he was in Pete Carroll's system. But that's not exactly how I see Johnson. Sure, they have similar attributes, but I think it's unfair to place such a high comparison on a rookie. That being said, Johnson has the potential to be a key contributor to the Raiders' defense if they give him the chance. Cornerback position. Let's talk about another cornerback prospect that the Raiders may target, Benjamin Morrison. I actually believe there's a better chance that the Raiders draft Morrison over someone like Will Johnson. While Johnson is likely a first-round pick, Morrison is expected to go around pick number 37, which could make him more accessible. I love Morrison's ability to make plays on the ball. He has 9 interceptions in 31 games. However, there's one thing to keep in mind. He's recovering from a torn labrum in his hip. I didn't even know that was a possible injury, but it's a concern. The injury raises questions, especially regarding his ability to flip his hips at a high level after such a major injury. This could affect his performance, and that's something the Raiders will have to evaluate closely. On the positive side, Morrison plays much bigger than his size, and he's a competitor through and through. One NFL scout I follow compared him to Marlon Humphrey, a player who brings 110% effort on every snap and competes at a high level. That's exactly what Pete Carroll looks for in a cornerback. Given those attributes, I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders target him in round 2. Both Morrison and Johnson have had meetings with the Raiders, and they were also present at the NFL Combine, so these two are definitely on the Raiders' radar. Keep an eye on these prospects because they could be critical pieces in the Raiders' defensive future. Linebacker position. Now, let's take a look at the linebacker position for the Raiders. There aren't many linebackers scheduled for top 30 visits, but one that stands out is Jalen Walker. I view Walker more as an outside linebacker or edge prospect. The Raiders could use him similarly to how they tried to use Kayvon Chaisson last season, bringing in a highly athletic, long, and lanky outside linebacker to complement the defensive scheme. Though linebacker may not be the Raiders' top priority, Walker's athleticism and potential as an edge rusher make him intriguing. The Raiders could experiment with him alongside Malcolm Kuntze, especially if Kuntze is on a 1-year deal. It's not a pressing need, but Walker's freakish athleticism could give the defense a dynamic edge player to develop. Other linebackers the Raiders met with at the NFL Combine include Jackson Woodard, a local prospect from UNLV, Carson Sweetinger, a sideline-to-sideline linebacker, Danny Stitzman, and Cody Simon. These players are more traditional inside linebackers, and they could fill the need for depth in the middle. The Raiders are still evaluating their inside linebacker options, especially considering that Christian Ellis will not be part of the team. There's a chance the Raiders could make a move to acquire him, but for now, the focus is on finding a solid inside linebacker. Walker, on the other hand, may be viewed more as a potential Tyree Wilson replacement if things don't work out with Wilson. It'll be interesting to see how the Raiders approach this position moving forward. Linebacker and safety position updates. When it comes to linebacker interest, the Combine visits indicate that the Raiders are likely looking at prospects in the 2nd to 4th round. This is consistent with something we discussed a few months ago. Quarterback, offensive line, and linebacker are the key positions the Raiders are focusing on upgrading. So keep that in mind as the draft approaches. Safety position. Now let's move on to the safety position, which is the final area the Raiders are focusing on with top 30 visits. I'm going to be blunt here. The biggest need for the Raiders on defense right now is at free safety. While the team has versatile safeties and strong safeties like Jeremy Chin and Isaiah Palamu, none of them are truly fit to be a day one free safety. So the safety market is something I'm watching very closely. The first name that comes to mind is Malachi Starks from Georgia, who I consider the top safety in the 2025 NFL Draft. Starks is a true do-it-all player. He can cover, stop the run, and make plays in different areas of the game. However, he does have a tendency to get beaten deep, possibly due to overconfidence at times. Despite that, he's a stud, and likely to be a first-round pick. I don't think the Raiders should target him at pick 6, but if they trade back and he's available, I can understand why they would consider him. It's worth noting that safeties have been known to fall a bit in the draft, so it's not out of the question that he could slide. The versatility Starks brings reminds me a lot of Brian Branch, the safety from Detroit, who also has the ability to be used in multiple ways. This versatility is something that fits perfectly with the Raiders' defensive scheme, particularly since they've been running a 3-safety, 2-linebacker set under Patrick Graham. That flexibility can confuse opposing offenses, and it's clear the Raiders are looking for someone who can contribute in multiple roles. Nick Emery. Next, let's talk about Nick Emery, a safety from South Carolina. He's a player that I've had my eye on for a while, and I actually compared him to Cam Chancellor a few months ago. Emery is one of those players who can do a little bit of everything. He can hit hard, cover well, and he's a true playmaker on the field. Like Derwin James, he models his game after the physical, all-around style of play, and you can see that on tape. The one thing to note is that I hope the Raiders don't try to convert him to linebacker, as we've seen with other players like Tanner Muse and Devin Diablo. I want to see Emery utilized as a hybrid safety chalker linebacker, someone who can move around and make plays in various situations. He's an athletic freak with a RAS, relative athletic score, that's off the charts. If you were to create the ideal safety on a video game, Emery would be the guy. At 6 feet 3 inches and 227 pounds, with great speed and athletic ability, he's a physical specimen. He reminds me of someone like Cam Chancellor, but even more versatile. Unfortunately, I don't think Emery will be available in round 2, so the Raiders might need to trade back if they're serious about targeting him. If they want him, they'll likely need to accumulate extra draft picks and take a bit of a risk, but he could be a great addition to their defense. Other safety and draft updates. Aside from Starks and Emery, there's another name to watch, Xavier Watts. Based on some of the information I've gathered, I'm telling you right now that the Raiders are paying close attention to Watts. Keep an eye on him as we get closer to the draft. Pro Day visits. On top of the top 30 visits, the Raiders have also met with a few prospects at Pro Days. These include Jeffrey Bosa, linebacker, Oregon; Teddy Buchanan, cornerback, Cal; Caleb Etienne, offensive lineman, BYU, a raw prospect with a lot of potential; Caleb Rogers, offensive lineman, Texas Tech, a versatile player who's played across the offensive line. He's been a starter at left tackle, left guard, and right tackle at Texas Tech over the last 5 years, showing his experience and flexibility. These are all players that the Raiders have met with, and it's worth noting that they could be on their radar as we move closer to the draft. Closing thoughts. So, that's where things stand right now, with the Raiders' top 30 visits. If any new official visits are scheduled, I'll make sure to update this video as soon as possible. Keep an eye on these positions and players as the Raiders continue to evaluate their options for the upcoming draft.